Hey, everybody, it's Scott Steehn with winnersandwhiners.com coming to you with day number 3 of our draft week extravaganza. I am joined once again by I would say my partner in crime. We are committing no crimes here. We are doing only good. Only good. We use our powers only for good. He is my partner over there at Winners and Whiners. We have been, both of us have been pretty much isolated. I know he was talking about not going out of his place much. I do not go out of my place much. I had to go out yesterday to sign my taxes. It's the first big, that was the big event of the day for me. Let's talk to him. Let's find out the last time he was outside and what big event he had. It is the one, the only. He is Scott Reichel. Scott, how are you today, sir?
Doing pretty well. I actually went outside briefly to pick up a newspaper. So that was my huge adventure of the morning.
Like at like the kiosk, or did you actually just walk out in front of you and pick it up out of the yard?
I literally walked 3 feet to pick up the newspaper from my door.
Okay, all right. So
Does that count? Does that count as a huge adventure to go outside?
It does these days. Absolutely. That is a big day for the likes of us. And I know I would be remiss if I did not mention that Scott is now clean shaven. Scott, got a Tinder date tonight? What's up with that?
It would be weird if I did, especially, I feel like Tinder is kind of relying on Zoom not to crash because it lets people actually talk to each other. But nah, I was just in the mood. I looked at the mirror and I realized this isn't really a good look for me. So I just decided to get rid of it a little bit.
And you're kind of like a swarthy guy. So how many days growth was that? Was that like a week?
No, that was at least, I'd say about a month or so.
Okay.
I got a little bit lazy with it. I mean, of course, I'm not really dressing to impress anybody with the beard, but not everyone can pull off a beard like you. So, you got to know your limitations.
It's only taken me about 40 years to get this to come in like that. The saddest thing is seeing my son's got a little quarantine stash going, and it's quite sad. He looks.
So is the beard growing with it, or does he just have a stash?
No, he's just doing the stash, and it doesn't come in all the way, so he kind of looks like got the little look like the Clark Gable stash going on.
Okay. It works really well for him. So maybe
I complimented him on his great trimming, and he goes, "That's how it grows in, Dad." I'm like, okay, then. I wish I had a pencil-thin mustache. Okay, so anyway, so today it is the day before the draft. It is the calm before the storm. We're going to take a look at a couple of things. We're going to take a look at some of the trade potentials. I know that we did our mock drafts, we did our props, and now we're going to talk about a couple teams that are likely to make a trade, at least in our eyes, a strong possibility. And then we're going to finish up the show doing something that I like to do, taking a look at the failures of others. We're going to look at some of the draft busts. I think we put together 5 of us, each put together a list of 5 draft busts of all time. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some duplication there. And we didn't do all time. We didn't go back to Ryan Leaf, which I think you and I probably agree is the all-time draft bust.
Well, considering the fact that Peyton Manning was the other choice, I think he has to be number 1 on that list.
Right. So there's a lot of factors. We'll talk about that when we get to it. So let's start off with, we just did them of this century, by the way. That's the point I was going to make. We just did 21st century draft bust. So let's start off with the trade situation. Scott, who's looking to make a deal? Who's looking to the other NFL teams to say, come on down?
Well, based on all the rumors you've heard, whether it's the last couple of weeks just through word of mouth or from Twitter, there have been reports involving the Lions and the Giants trying to trade back from their number 3 pick and the number 4 pick, respectively. Now, I'm not really sure how common trades are going to be. We talked about this yesterday because of the very unique format and the fact that you have a bunch of 60-year-old guys who don't really know how to use a computer trying to communicate with others. But, I'm just saying, because, they had a technical glitch in the mock draft that they tried to do on Monday. So you got to wonder if teams will be a little bit paranoid to pull the trigger when it comes to actually trading back. I think that might impact some teams earlier on. But at the end of the day, if somebody gets a Godfather offer that they can't refuse, I think that they're going to pull the trigger anyway. So for me, the Lions are rumored to potentially trade back. The Giants are potentially rumored to trade back at 4. I'm a little bit more skeptical on the Giants trading back because Gettleman, in the history of his GM career, has never traded back in any round ever. That's a fact. He's never traded back in any draft he's ever been in, including 7th round. Never done it. So I don't think he's suddenly going to trade the 4th pick. I don't really see that happening. The Lions are a little bit more likely to do so because they also need significantly more help. I mean, that team's terrible. I mean, there's no way around it. But Do I think they're going to actually pull the trigger on making a trade? No, especially with the concerns involving Herbert and just because I mentioned before I don't like him, and Tua's injuries. I don't really believe that one team is going to offer a king's ransom to move up to the third pick to take either of the two.
And that's the likely trading partner you would see for them as somebody looking to snipe a quarterback.
Well, that's the point, though. Yeah, is that if the thing is, Detroit doesn't need a quarterback. The Giants don't need a quarterback. And you already know the Bengals are going to take Burrow at 1. Redskins maybe at 2 could ship it, but either or. You know the Redskins don't really need a quarterback. I think they probably do because I'm not a Haskins guy, but they're definitely looking for Chase Young. Detroit doesn't really need a quarterback because they have Matt Stafford. The Giants just got Daniel Jones. So if you're the Dolphins, why would you trade up to the third when nobody in front of you would take a quarterback anyway? The only fear is if the Chargers, hypothetically, would try to leapfrog the Dolphins. But the Dolphins have nothing to worry about unless the Chargers, who are the only people who could take Tua over them by trading, they pretty much have Tua falling into their lap. Right?
Yeah, I agree. I think the Chargers would probably be the more likely candidate there for a trade with the Lions. Now, the problem with the Lions making that trade is if they make the trade with Miami and move from the third to the fifth spot, they most likely can still get the guy that they have targeted, which is Okudah. He's probably most likely still going to be available with the fifth spot. Obviously, the team that moves into the third spot would not take him. The Giants would seem an unlikely match for a cornerback. I mean, they need so much more help. So the pick for the Redskins, the pick for the Lions would still be there at number 5. So it kind of would be a no-brainer if somebody made that offer.
Yeah, I just don't know why Miami would do that. Because if you look at who's in front of Miami, nobody's a threat to take Tua. The only risk is if the Chargers try to leapfrog you.
Right. So it has to be whether they worry about that or not. And I'm not sure that Detroit's going to trade with the Chargers because Okudah would unlikely still be there by the time that the Chargers made their pick. So yeah, you and I both zeroed in on that. So likelihood, give it a percentage. What do you think the likelihood of that trade happening? Anything involving the Lions?
Of the Lions and the Chargers, or just the Lions with anybody?
The Lions with anybody.
For percentage-wise, I'm going to say roughly 5%.
5%?
Even though that sounds low, and I think that it would be higher in most years, a part of me really thinks that some of these GMs are going to be so paranoid about technical glitches and all this other stuff in a unique circumstance that I just don't think that other teams would be willing to just ship off their early draft picks in a situation like this. Am I wrong for feeling they're going to be a bit paranoid?
No, and I think there's also going to be a matter of I think the picks may be a little more valuable this year because you're not going to get to work out a lot of guys. I don't think there's going to be it's much more of a dart throw, especially once you get later in the rounds. So these top 100 picks, man, that's going to be a lot of valuable currency.
And that's the issue with Tua. Because since you can't fully analyze them, you're kind of just – I mean, of course, his health is going to be a risk no matter what, even if you saw him in person. But you'll feel more certain about his current state if you could actually test him out yourself, and you can't.
Sure. And, yeah, that's gonna be an interesting one to follow, and he may fit on our list in the next couple of years as far as draft bust because he is for sure going to go in the first round. And with his health and with his hip, he absolutely has a shot of being a complete and total bust.
Do you have a percentage for the Lions?
Yeah, 20% to the Chargers. I think almost 0% to the Dolphins. I think 1 in 5.
And do you think the Chargers would take Tua or Herbert with the third pick?
That's a great question. I think they want to make a splash. I think they would take Tua. That'd be my
honestly, that's the thing about the NFL draft, that there's so many smoke screens and so much false information out there. Because, of course, teams aren't going to tell you what they're going to do when there's 5 people picking in front of them. I actually think the Chargers would go for Herbert personally. But
and I was going to say that's all the problem with the late heat. You know, where all this noise and you don't know what is real and what is just kind of chaff that they're throwing into the air as far as misdirection goes.
Yeah.
Are teams really souring on Tua? You know, you see all these draft insiders and they've got hot takes with a couple of days left to go before the draft. I never know how much stock to put in that. I don't know what people are hearing. And I think people are hearing even less these days because they don't have sources inside the front office where people are in meetings, and I think these meetings are a lot more close. I think they're a lot more closed, and I think they are keeping their information a lot more closer to the vest. So, we'll see. And I think I'm like you. I agree that there will be fewer trades. Now, what an interesting prop that we didn't talk about yesterday was the number of trades in the first round over under 5.5. Scott, that sounds like a lot to me.
Well, I know that I believe we mentioned it briefly, but I didn't really dive much into it. I was a fan of the under at the value that presented itself. I mean, the issue you're going to have involves usually the later picks in the first round. Because in the top 10, you'll always get one or two. Somebody will jump. And then usually in the 20s, everything's a free-for-all, and you see a couple of trades late. Where some teams are trading out of the first round, usually a Seattle or maybe a New England, somebody like that, who if they look at the board and they basically say the top 5 prospects that we wanted to target are all gone, why do we even want to pick here? And that's kind of the issue you're going to run into in the later part of the first round. So that's why basically what I'm trying to say is that if you're going to take the under, which I think based on all of what I just said with the paranoia involving all the GMs makes sense, I think that it's going to look pretty good early, and then you're going to have to sweat a little bit late. I think that's basically how it usually works when it comes to first-round trades.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on who comes off the board. If there's a run on a certain position or certain players are gone a little earlier than anticipated, and that's kind of what I was looking at with another trade possibility that I was looking at between the Jags and the Bucks. If they start to have a run on defensive linemen, I think the Jags could look to move up to take defensive tackle Derek Brown out of Auburn. Jags have 12 picks in the draft. They got 3 in the first 2 rounds. I think they give up somewhere around like pick number 73, one of their third round picks, to move up 6 spots and take Derek Brown and have the Bucks move down 6 spots. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that could make some sense. However, there has been a lot of steam lately within the last, I'd say, about 12 hours on C.J. Henderson, now projected to go in the top 10. And I think that actually makes a lot of sense for Jacksonville to take him, especially after trading Boye during the offseason. You get to draft the local kid who went to Florida for college, and you have absolute holes on your secondary. There's been a ton of movement for Henderson. I believe BetOnline still has over-under 16.5, roughly minus 700 to the under. Now it's roughly over-under 12.5 at almost every book now, with juice to the under. Ton of steam on Henderson. I'm starting to think Jacksonville might actually go with him with the 9th pick.
See, that's my question. Where does that steam come from?
I have no idea, but all I know is that the more I actually think about it, the more it actually makes sense. I mean, I don't know. Well, how much stock do you think teams buy into the fact that they played in a college local to where the team is located? Do you think that matters at all?
Oh, I think it depends on the team.
I think Jacksonville would definitely do that.
Yeah, I think it matters a lot more to places like where college football is big, like Texas.
That's why Florida, I think, makes sense because he literally played for the Gators. I think that makes perfect sense for Henderson to potentially go 9 to Jacksonville.
Right. I think if the Chiefs, for example, are they going to give much value to a guy that played at Mizzou or K-State or KU? No, they're not going to give a lot of extra juice.
That's why they win Super Bowls.
That's why they win Super Bowls, baby.
I know. The thing you also have to wonder about Jacksonville and some other teams is that they're so bad that you can really go in any direction. Like, would you be surprised if Jacksonville traded up or traded down? Of course not. This team's terrible.
No, they've got – I'd kind of be surprised if they traded down just because they have so many picks already, but they definitely need to restock the cupboard. So, yeah, nothing would really shock me with the Jags there, but I think they're more likely to trade up just because they have the capital there in the draft. What else you got for a likely trade?
Well, one thing to mention with regard to props, BetOnline actually uploaded this a couple of days ago. They have a prop on whether the New England Patriots will trade the 23rd pick or not. The no is minus 160, and the yes is plus 120. Do you have any thoughts on New England with the 23rd pick?
They are a team that traditionally isn't afraid to make a deal, to pick up some extra draft picks there. The one thing we didn't talk about, kind of the elephant in the room, speaking of New England, how about the Gronk trade? The trading the WWE's newest superstar to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a 4th-round pick. Anything left in the tank for Gronk?
I think he probably has some left in the tank. Of course, he's definitely not in football shape. However, he's in wrestling shape, so I don't really know if there's any steroids or anything attached to that. But Gronk has always been a great athlete. I think he'll probably be fine. But you also have to wonder, he's had so many injuries over the course of his career, how much does he really have left in the tank? I mean, of course, any team would take Gronk at 70%, and he would still be the starting tight end. I mean, there's no way around it. In my opinion, I think he's the most dominant tight end in the history of the NFL.
Well, I think there's a couple of teams that wouldn't do that, but
yeah, maybe a couple. But either or, I know your Kansas City Chiefs would probably stick with Kelsey, and maybe the 49ers would stick with Kittle.
Those are the two I was thinking of.
Other than that, I think any team would take Gronk if they had the option to. And I think that the trade itself, I guess, good for Tampa Bay. I mean, New England didn't really have any choice. They traded a retired guy for a 4th-round pick. And he wasn't going to play for New England. So I guess New England – I still thought they could have got more than a 4, just based on the name Gronk alone and the premise of reuniting Brady with Gronk. I thought could have probably gotten a 2nd or a 3rd rounder, just the idea alone. But for me, good for Gronk. I feel like Belichick looked at Gronk and decided, you know what? You helped us win a couple rings. I'll give it to you. Enjoy. There was no – fight back on anything. Gronk basically announced at 2 p.m, I'm coming back, but I want to play for the Buccaneers. And there was no struggle. The Patriots are at 3 o'clock an hour later. Yeah, right, here you go. Go to Tampa Bay. It seemed like there was a bit of loyalty attached to it. Am I wrong for thinking that?
No, they I think they were able to facilitate his deal, and and they knew that they knew that he wasn't going to play for them.
It happened so quickly, though. It was just I want to play it, but not here. And Belichick, instead of trying to fully convince him to stay or anything of that sort, just said, "Yeah, right, here you go. Thanks for all your help." And I don't know. It seemed like he kind of did him a favor at that point.
Yeah, I started seeing the rumors that Gronk wanted to come back, and I'm thinking to myself, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." And then, an hour later, it did.
Well, one thing that I actually thought was a bit of a conspiracy theory by me, I feel like part of the reason why he came back, do you think it's a coincidence that he invested in that CBD company and now the NFL officially took weed off its radar for drug screening? Do you think that's a coincidence, or do you think that might have played a factor? I think it's an underrated factor on why he came back.
Well, I hadn't actually thought about it from that angle, but
because he mentioned how he used to be in pain all the time and how he wanted to use weed as a painkiller and stuff like that, and now they're not really testing for it.
Right.
I think that might have actually had a slight impact on why he wanted to come back. Of course, the main reason was to play with Brady. I'm not saying that it wasn't a factor or it wasn't the obvious reason why, but you don't think that could have potentially, because he literally just invested in a company that is now selling products that will not be tested by the NFL starting basically this year. Is that not a conspiracy? I think that's a valid conspiracy theory by me.
I think maybe Gronk's just always wanted to play high.
I think that definitely is a factor, but I think that since that's illegal now, I think that that might have, been the cherry on top, so to speak.
Could be.
I don't know. It's just a thought by me, but whatever.
All right, very good. And do you does that make any difference how you feel about Tampa Bay? Do you think that leaps them ahead of New Orleans down there?
I didn't know Gronk could play cornerback. No, they have no defense whatsoever. Don't get me wrong. The offense is really good. I think they have to ship O.J. Howard, though. Because I think that you either have O.J. Howard or Cameron Brate with Gronk, and I think O.J. Howard would fetch more on the open market. So I would probably trade O.J. Howard for maybe a 3rd-round pick or so, which is a terrible flip because you literally drafted him in the 1st round about 2 years ago.
Right.
But Gronk's the number 1 tight end. Brate's a good red zone guy. I don't really think you have much of a purpose for O.J. Howard. I know he's a great athlete, but you can get more in the open market. And their secondary is still a disaster. So for me, I would still take New Orleans to win the division. But I still said before the season started, before they got Gronk, I think they'll go 9-7. And I think now they might go 10-6.
Maybe add an extra game. That sounds about right.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
But,
but just to circle back, though, for New England with the 23rd pick, in my mock draft with trades that I uploaded to my Twitter yesterday, I actually have them trading the 23rd pick. So I actually do have them trading back.
I think that's a good call. What about Seattle, the other wheeler dealer team there in the first round?
Seattle's tough. I actually think they're going to keep it. I know that they've had a lot of issues when it comes to drafting people in the first round. Historically, Pete Carroll's is one of the best at finding gems in the third round onward. He's an all-timer when it comes to that type of draft stuff. But when it comes to the actual needs of the roster, with Clowney still unsigned, you pretty much have to draft the best defensive end or the best edge rusher available on the board. I think it's a no-brainer. That's pretty much the main concern you have. And if you have an AJ Epinesa still available, I think you have to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, I think at the very least they've got to get Clowney some help. I think he is ultimately going to end up playing for him this season.
But they don't know that. So then I think they're going to try to address their needs as of right now and then deal with Clowney after.
Now, it certainly gives them a little more leverage, too, if they were to start if they were to pick a plug-and-play edge rusher.
I think San Francisco is guaranteed to trade their 31st pick. I've been saying this for weeks. But I actually reached out to Dave Mason from Bet Online yesterday, and I asked him to add the prop on the 49ers trading the 31st pick. He said he would, so I'm waiting for him to get back to me. But overall, the 49ers, I think they have to trade the pick. I've gone through it multiple times. I sound like a broken record. They have 0 combined picks in the second, third, and fourth round. They pretty much have to trade the 31st pick. So if you're looking at trades and who might go where and who whatever, one team's trading up for a wide receiver. That's the way that I view it. And according to my mock draft with trades, I have the Colts trading the 34th pick and the 75th pick to move up to the 31st pick to take Jalen Reagor out of TCU.
Okay. Not a bad call. Not a bad call. And that does give the Niners a couple more bullets there to fire later in the rounds or later in the draft. So
gives them a second and a third, and the Colts, as we all know, besides T.Y. Hilton, have absolutely no receiver depth whatsoever. And a 34, which is a 3-pick jump, I think you could get a receiver at 34, of course, but if they like one guy in particular, it would not surprise me to see them try to move up 3 spots.
All right, good call. We'll see how that all plays out tomorrow. Very good. Any other trades on your board that you want to talk about?
Well, I mentioned yesterday my conspiracy trade. I got the Raiders trading the 12th pick, the 80th pick, and the 81st pick to the Carolina Panthers to move up to the 7th pick, and I got them taking Justin Herbert. That's my out of left field trade. There's always one trade where you look through and you go, wow, I really didn't see that coming. And I think the Raiders are that wild card team that'll just say, screw it, we like this guy, we don't care what anybody else thinks. And I think, based on what I said earlier with how there might be less trades in the top 5 picks because of the lack of certainty regarding Tua's health, I think Tua will go 5. And I think if the Chargers don't go with Herbert, which I think is a decent possibility if they believe they can get a Cam Newton on the free agency market for a discount, then I think teams will be trading up to take Herbert because there's a ton of spots in a row that don't need a quarterback.
Right.
And I think the Raiders might just decide, I don't like Derek Carr, we got to make a move. And if you actually look at Carr's contract, even though that contract extension was basically a bad move because Carr has not turned into the guy they want him to be, based on what other quarterbacks are getting paid, Carr's actually only getting paid about $19 million. Now, I know I sound kind of ridiculous when I'm saying only right in front of $19 million, but you compare him to the Garoppolo contracts and all these other contracts, $19 million for a mediocre NFL quarterback is actually not terrible.
It's a bargain. It's a horrible thing to say, but you're absolutely right. It is a bargain.
So I think they could afford to potentially trade up and take a quarterback, and the Raiders are always that team that tries to make a splash. I went through it yesterday. Do you really think you can go to Vegas with Derek Carr and Mariota as your 2 quarterbacks on the roster?
I don't know, man. That's a great question. We'll see how that plays out. I like that. That is definitely that's stepping out.
Carolina's probably going to – if they really could, why wouldn't they trade back? That team is terrible,
yeah.
Carolina. So that's my thoughts on that.
They need bodies. All right, so let's talk about our second part of the show and the all-time draft bust in the 21st century. Now, we've got a couple of parameters. I don't know how you did your list, but I kind of to me, the higher they were drafted, the more likely they would be to be on this list. You know, if you've got 28th pick or a second round pick and they don't pan out, that's not that big of a deal. It's when you spend that some of that serious top 10, top 5 draft capital that doesn't pan out at all, that it tends to be thought of more as a bust. Do you agree with that?
So just to touch upon that, I know we're supposed to do a list of 5. I prepared 7 because I assumed we'd have some overlap on a couple that I wanted to get some extras in.
Right.
6 of my 7 were top 10 picks.
Okay.
All right. The same logic, yeah.
All right. So I'll start us off. How about Courtney Brown, defensive end, the Cleveland Browns, the year 2000. Now, he did stick with the Browns for 6 seasons, put up 19 sacks over those 6 seasons, just played 61 games. Absolute. I didn't write his number down. I think he was a 4. Is that right for Courtney Brown?
I actually don't have him on my list, but I could find that out right now.
All right. So who you got on yours?
So number 7 was a bit of a wild card. I decided to I put a sleeper bust as number 7 on my list here.
Okay.
Just to recap, Courtney Brown was actually the number 1 overall pick.
He was a 1-1. Okay.
So you might have to move him up on your board a little bit.
All right.
Number 1. But my number 7 was Justin Blackmon, wide receiver out of Oklahoma State. He ended up going number 5 overall in 2012 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The reason why I have him here, first of all, I know he was great in his rookie season. He played roughly 5 games in his second year and then never played again. He was a 2-time Biletnikoff Award winner, so he was the best receiver in college twice. And he has not played a snap since 2013.
Okay, that's
he played in a year and a half. He failed the NFL drug policy twice. He got arrested for weed. He got arrested for a DUI, and he has not been reinstated since 2013. So his career is basically over, and he played in a total of 20 games.
Not good. Not good at all.
I put him at 5. It was upsetting though, because I actually have a soft spot for Justin Blackmon, because the first year I ever did fantasy football, I had Justin Blackmon in his rookie year, and he helped carry me to the championship game. So I always have a sweet spot for him, but I have to put him on this list. He literally only played a year and a half.
Well, and I've got one on my list here, and it's kind of an asterisk. It's speaking of the Carr brothers, it's David Carr, quarterback for the Houston Texans. That was their inaugural season there in 2002, number 1 pick overall. And this is a kid that came out of Houston, kind of a system quarterback, and he wasn't without talent, but he was sacked 76 times in his rookie season. And he spent most of his career with the Texans just running for his life. His 4th year there, he was sacked 68 times. Over his 5 seasons with Houston, he threw 59 touchdowns, 68 INTs. I'm going to call him a bust just because of where he was taken and how he ended up going, but I'm not sure this is entirely his fault.
I have Derek Carr on my list also. Just a quick question with yours. Did you prepare him in order from like the 7th worst bust to the 1st, or you just had a list of players?
I kind of got him in order.
Okay, so you have Carr at number 4?
I actually, I had him at number 6, basically. I've got a couple others ahead of him.
Okay.
And it was kind of an informal list. I got more top 5 as we went towards the bottom. I'm just kind of throwing some of my honorable mentions out there, basically.
Yeah, I put David Carr, I should say, at number 3 on my list on biggest busts. I mean, you kind of have to. I agree it wasn't fully his fault. He played 76 games in his career with Houston and was sacked 249 times. Now, if you want to do the math on that, that means he was sacked 3.27 times per game in his career with Houston. So they basically tried to kill him. Now, looking at the stats, though, he had 65 touchdowns and 71 receptions, and he had a career record of 23 and 56. So he didn't win the games. However, on the bright side, he did end his career on a high note, as he did win a Super Bowl with the New York Giants in 2012. He was a backup quarterback on the roster, so he actually is the only person on my list to have a ring. So good for him, but at the same point, You can't draft somebody number 1 overall, go 23 and 56, and for me not to have you on this list.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard to argue with. All right, who you got? Who you got next on your list?
Okay, so I had Carr at 3, but I'm going to go in order. Number 6 on my list, 7 was Blackman. Number 6 was Matt Leinart, number 10 overall in 2006. He won a Heisman Trophy. He was the starting quarterback on one of the most, if not the most dominant college football team in the history of college football. I would still probably lean to the early 2000s Miami team as the greatest team of all time, but those USC teams have to be somewhere in the top 5. I mean, those teams are all-timers. And Leinart, fun fact, never started more than 5 games in a single season after his rookie year. Now, the reason why I have him at 6, you could put him higher, but at the end of the day, he wasn't a number 1 overall pick. He wasn't in the top 5. And second of all, he kind of lost some years of potential productivity because Kurt Warner found the fountain of youth and pretty much became an elite quarterback once again in his late 30s. And you cannot play Matt Leinart based on how good Kurt Warner was. So I give him a little bit of a pass there, but not playing more than 5 games after your rookie year, you have to make my list.
Yeah, I put Leinart together with Vince Young. I kind of cheated there. I put them together as they were always going to be linked by that 2005 championship game, and I thought it was interesting that both of those guys basically turned out to be less than stellar NFL quarterbacks. So I had Leinart and Vince Young forever coupled together on the draft bus.
I think Vince Young was better, but yes, I agree. They both did not pan out.
All right, so here's another quarterback. This quarterback was a number 2 pick overall. And again, a guy that had some talent, was certainly injury prone, and the team just wore him out his rookie season. That was Robert Griffin III. He was the number 2 pick in 2009. The same draft, by the way, they took Kirk Cousins in the 4th round, I believe, when everybody couldn't figure out why they took another quarterback. Well, I guess we all know the answer to that. Robert Griffin III, not terrible his first season. Pretty dynamic quarterback, threw for 20 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions. Took him to the playoffs. Probably shouldn't have played the playoff games there, and ended up pretty much blasting his knee and curtailing his career. Now, he is still in the league, so it's hard to call him a complete and utter bust, but they certainly, I think, cut his career short by the way they used him there in that first season.
Well, yes. The thing about Robert Griffin III, which is the most upsetting part, is the fact that 1 year, his rookie year, he basically revolutionized the quarterback position. He was basically Lamar Jackson before Lamar Jackson. If you really think about it, that Redskin team, that was around the same time that Kaepernick was doing all the read option stuff, where it was very popular. Robert Griffin III and Alfred Morris were actually unbelievable that year. I had Alfred Morris that year also on my fantasy team, and I think he ran for about 2,000 yards. Robert Griffin III was the 2nd overall pick, and he took the Redskins, who were supposed to be awful, and he somehow carried them to the playoffs.
Right.
Now, of course, everyone remembers the ball on the ground, his leg, completely falling apart, and never being the same guy. I'm a little bit more hesitant to put him in a top 5, top 10 list, because he's really hung around for a long time, and he actually won a game last year. He beat Pittsburgh last year with Baltimore. Of course, based on where he was picked, he probably is a bust. But I give him respect for actually hanging around longer than people thought he would have.
Okay. All right. Who you got next on your list?
So number 6 was Leinart. Number 5, I got Joey Harrington, the number 3 overall pick in 2002 to the Lions. He was a Heisman Trophy finalist, 26 and 50 overall record, and he had 85 touchdowns and he had 85 interceptions and 79 touchdowns. Number 3 overall pick went to the Lions. Lions tend to be a recurring theme on my list. I have them a couple of times.
Yeah.
But you have to put Joey Harrington here. I mean, he was terrible.
All right. I've got a pick that wasn't a top 10 pick, and I just had to throw him up there because he was such a spectacular flame out, and that's Johnny Manziel.
I have the same. He was the one guy I had who wasn't in the top 10.
Right. He was the number 22 pick, went to the Browns in 2014, lasted just two seasons. Absolutely dreadful numbers, and I think he put himself on this list by the Johnny football personality.
There's the partying and all that other stuff.
And how spectacularly he flamed out. So we agree on that one. All right. Give me another one.
Yeah, Manziel was my number 4. 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions in 15 games. And then you flame out of the Canadian Football League as well. Not exactly a good look. But, number 3, I had David Carr. You already mentioned him. Number 2 is a huge sleeper that I don't think enough people talk about, and it's wide receiver Charles Rogers.
I've got him at number 2 also.
The number 2 overall pick in 2003 to, once again, the Detroit Lions. He won the Biletnikoff. He was projected to be phenomenal. He went to Michigan State, so he was a local kid being drafted number 2. He played in 15 career games and finished with 440 receiving yards. He got arrested for assault. He got jailed for violating probation. He got arrested for being under the influence with alcohol. And as police found him passed out in his car. Then he got arrested again for passing out in a restaurant, spent 3 months in jail, got tested positive for weed twice, and had a diluted substance at the combine. And then he got suspended for weed again in 2005 and never played again. He was the number 2 overall pick and only played in 15 games and finished with 440 receiving yards.
Yeah,
you have to put him on this list.
36 receptions, 4 TDs in 3 years.
He was basically Justin Blackmon, except his rookie season was awful. And They were both out of the league in 2 years. That's why I got Blackmon at 7 and why I got Rodgers at 2. He has to be in the top 3.
Well, and I know we are going to have the same pick is going to be the number 1.
It has to be the same person.
I'm going to talk about Darius Hayward-Bay here a little bit. You and I discussed him off camera. It's hard to put him really square in the middle of this list because he has had a 10-year career, 5 with the Raiders and 5 with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh sort of resurrected.
We're doing honorable mentions, right? This isn't your number 1. We're doing honorable mentions now, right?
Right. This is not my number 1. This is the only other one on my list. I think you and I are going to agree on number 1. Darius Hayward-Bay, the number 7 pick for the Raiders in 2009. Like I said, he ended up sticking around 10 years.
He had a decent career for an initial bust. I got to give him props for that.
Yeah, he's had 202 receptions, 16 TDs over a 10-year period. It's not bad for a 5th rounder, but still quite an underachiever for the first round.
Yeah, one of my honorable mentions was Vernon Gholston, linebacker, to end up going to the Jets out of Ohio State. I think he was the 7th pick.
Yeah, 6th pick. I got him on there too.
He was awful.
Never recorded a sack over 3 years. 45 tackles. That's it.
You could argue that he should be on this list, but he was at 7. And honestly, no offense to defensive players, but quarterback tends to be the more important position. So I kind of stuck with quarterbacks there. Golston could easily be on anybody's top 7 list. If we were doing a top 10, Golston would easily be there.
Yeah, no question. All right, so go ahead and pop the seal. I'll let you have the glory and tell us the number 1.
I actually want you to do it, and then I'll provide a story regarding this player.
All right. Well, I've surprisingly, Scott, I have Jamarcus Russell.
Really? Wow, I almost just spoiled his name while I was talking. You go first.
The number 1 draft bust, the 6'5", 265-pound Jamarcus Russell, 2007, 1-1 overall to the Raiders. 3 years, 25 starts, 18 touchdowns, 23 picks, and I understand he was 4th in the wing eating contest. So no.
But did you hear that he could throw a football on a knee 80 yards? Did anyone ever tell you that?
Did not know that.
I went through that yesterday when it comes to evaluating players. I mean, some people are just so distracted by the arm strength and the actual physical talent that they ignore all the mental aspects of the game, whether or not they actually have a good work ethic, which clearly he did not. Jamarcus Russell might have actually had the worst work ethic of all time, if you actually just hear some of the stories. But to mention Jamarcus Russell, I can't avoid mentioning the contract. And just to preface this, Jamarcus Russell, Sam Bradford had a decent career considering all the injuries he had. Sam Bradford and Jamarcus Russell basically changed the NFL because they basically forced the NFL to create a new collective bargaining agreement in which rookie quarterbacks taken 1st overall are not automatically paid $60 million. They basically changed the NFL because of how bad those contracts were. To break down Jamarcus Russell, he got paid $31.5 million guaranteed, and he got paid $68 million in total without ever playing a down in the NFL. The contract that he got was for $68 million. and he never played a snap in the NFL. That was before he played a snap, right out of college. So the NFL realized we have to change this. We can't. This is not sustainable. We can't have rookie quarterbacks, number 1 overall, getting paid $80 million. We can't have this happen. That's just ridiculous. So Jamarcus Russell basically changed the NFL because of how bad he was. But going through his actual records, he started in 25 games in his career, was 7-18, and he never played after getting cut in his after his first 3 seasons. Now, it is worth mentioning, even though the Raiders needed a quarterback, he was drafted before Calvin Johnson, Adrian Peterson, and Marshawn Lynch. So there were a couple of really good Hall of Fame options at different positions. The Raiders ended up going with Russell. And there's actually a story about Russell with his work ethic, which I'll get into in a sec. I'll let you have some moments to roast him if you want.
No, it was it was hard to it was hard to watch, and I actually saw him play a couple times in person, and he was just absolutely dreadful. He reminded me of another Raiders draft bust there in the first round, and of course that was before the 2000 cutoff, but that was Todd Marinovich, another guy that the Raiders
30 for 30 on him was actually very underrated.
Hung their hat on. He was quite a story, as he was just basically bred as a cyborg to do nothing but play in the NFL from the time he was born.
He went to USC, had some addiction issues. Yeah, there was a documentary about it.
You know, basically they never let him out of the basement until he went to college. And surprisingly, once he saw Gay Perry, it was hard to keep him down on the farm. He kind of went nuts there at USC. And
I mean, it's definitely a fair point to mention. I know that if we were going for honorable mentions before 2000, I feel like you got to mention Tony Mandarich. I mean, he kind of falls under the Darius Hayward-Bay aspect, where he was a complete bust, and then he kind of had a little bit of a run in his comeback or on the latter stage of his career.
Right.
So they kind of made something out of nothing. But to go back to Jamarcus Russell, I forgot who told this story, but somebody told on the Rich Eisen radio show, I believe it was about a year ago. It was one of his former teammates back in the Lane Kiffin era of the Raiders, which was about a year. And the story was that Jamarcus Russell, of course, as everyone knows, was awful when it came to practicing and going through film and all this other stuff. He just wasn't interested. He didn't do any of that. So the coaching staff, when they were trying to teach Jamarcus Russell some new plays, decided to test out his work ethic. I don't know if you know the story or not.
No.
They tested out his work ethic. And what they decided to do was that they would burn a bunch of plays onto CDs and tell all the players, we want you to look at these 10 plays, tell us what you think. We might run this on Sunday. That kind of thing, pretty standard. Let them learn the plays at home so they can become more familiar with the system, etc. So the coaching staff was like, all right, we're going to do this. So they hand Jamarcus Russell the CD and tell him, look at these plays. We're looking into adding these for the playbook on Sunday. Let us know what you think. So Jamarcus Russell comes back the next day, and the coaching staff asks him, what do you think of the plays? Were there any plays you liked? Were there any plays you didn't like? What do you think? And Jamarcus Russell says to the coaching staff, I loved all the plays. Throw them all in. Anything you want to run's fine with me, coach. So the coaches look at each other, and they look at Russell. It's like, yeah, you sure you liked all the plays? He's like, yeah, I loved all of them. It was all good. We'll run them on Sunday. It'll all work out. So the coaching staff looks at each other in complete concern and complete just disgust. And the reason why was that the CD was blank. They put no plays onto the CD, and it was a test to see if Jamarcus Russell was actually looking at film or not. And he, of course, failed miserably because he didn't realize that the CD was blank.
Nice. So
that's a story. I don't know if you knew that. I forgot who put that on. You can look it up on Rich Eisen's show. If you just look up Rich Eisen, Jamarcus Russell story, there's a full thing about it, the exact same way as I told it. But yeah, that's pretty much why he didn't work out.
Outstanding. So, Scott, just a kind of a quick aside before we go here. Which player has the biggest potential to be on this list next year or in a couple of years?
Well, the thing about Tua is that he has a Robert Griffin III type of vibe to him, where he can look phenomenal for 1 year maybe 2 years, and then one knee injury and it's all over. So if you wanted to compare Tua to anybody, of course, Robert Griffin III was basically a track star. In terms of athleticism, he's one of the most athletic quarterbacks I've ever seen that people don't talk about, especially when he won the Heisman with Baylor that one year. But I think Tua has Robert Griffin III potential because the ceiling's very high and the floor is very low. So I think Tua could fall there. For me, I think Trubisky is going to be an honorable mention on here in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I'm going to go Justin Herbert. I really just think he's going to be terrible.
I knew you were going to say that. I just wanted to give you one more chance to.
I had to. I have to. There's a couple of quarterbacks here who could easily be busts, but I really think Herbert's going to go in the top 6. You have any thoughts?
No, I'm with you. I worry about all those offensive linemen, but I'm not sure which one's going to be your bust there. But I think out of Wills, Becton, Wirfs, and Thomas, I think one of those guys is going to be a bust. You would point at Becton with his flag drug test, but I don't know how much that really means at this point. So yeah,
and that's going to affect his stock. I don't know about his ability to perform in the NFL. So.
Yeah, we're gonna find out. It should be interesting. And I think one of those receivers also has a good possibility. I think it's going to be Jerry Jeudy. I think he's a system wide receiver. I'd rather have CeeDee Lamb at this point. And I'd certainly rather have Henry Ruggs either over Jerry Jeudy. So that's kind of my prediction.
I think one of them is going to be a bust too. I'm not sure which one. Truth is, I might surprise you. I was leaning a little bit to Lamb. Of course, Ruggs is the safe pick to be a bust because of the fact that he literally is just a great athlete. And I don't know if he really brings much else to the table besides just being faster and being able to jump higher. I don't know if his route running is really good. I don't really know if it was because he was facing off against a bunch of below average, out of conference, and SEC defenses where he just sprinted past everybody, which is kind of what you said about Jeudy. You make the same argument about Ruggs because it was the same system.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Both. I don't know. There's something about Lamb to me where I agree that I see the potential, but I don't know. I mean, the Big 12, we make fun of the SEC's defenses. The Big 12 might actually be one of the worst defensive conferences in the entire country year in, year out. They are terrible defensively every year. And CeeDee Lamb also, I know he's healthy. He's had a couple of injuries here and there. He's not fully durable. So I do give some props to Jeudy. He had surgery, but he ended up playing a full season, missed no games. And Ruggs had no injury issues to speak of, as far as I can recall. Lamb's had a couple. So I think that in terms of injury, which is something that tends to plague wide receivers, I think Lamb would be the biggest risk. But in terms of probability, I think Ruggs probably has the highest probability of being a bust. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, you're probably right. Just because he's more just of a speed guy and less of a receiver. So yeah, those guys are always going to be in danger of being a bust when they can't run routes, because route running is so important in the NFL. You have to be a good route runner. You can't be lazy with your cuts. You have to be able to run everything on the tree.
That's why I like Jeudy. Yeah. Jeudy, I originally wasn't the biggest Jeudy guy, but then I actually watched some film on his routes. He's the best route runner in the draft. He's actually insane when it comes to creating separation off the break. It's actually nuts if you watch some of the film.
Well, we'll see what happens. I was surprised that neither one of us put Aldon Smith on the list.
His career's not officially over yet.
Yeah, and he was an All-Pro his first year.
I can't add him to the list because he actually had roughly 33.5 sacks in his first 2 seasons. He was on pace to be one of the greatest defensive sack masters of all time, if you just look at pace. Yeah. And then his career completely fell apart.
Yeah, just totally self-inflicted too.
Mm-hmm. So. It's a shame.
All right, bud. Well, there you go. You excited for the draft tomorrow?
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to add a couple more props, trying to see through all the smoke screens, trying to find out what's valuable information and what's a bunch of BS. But, we'll find out, and hopefully it's entertaining. As long as day 2, they say Jake Fromm went in the Little League World Series, I make $25. So that's my silver lining for the draft.
Beautiful. Yeah, and tomorrow we'll talk about we'll talk on to the opposite. We're going to talk about draft steals. Since we're going to be shooting our show before the actual draft itself, we're going to talk about some of the all-time steals in the draft.
In addition to that, we could talk about some of our sleepers in the upcoming draft.
Yep, I like that too. All right, very good. All right, bud. I appreciate it as always. Another fun time. What do you got on the agenda for today? Any movie watching? Anything going on?
Not really. I'm kind of just taking it easy. As a Yankees fan who wasn't even born yet at the time of the game, I guiltfully did watch part of the 95 ALDS game against the Mariners, where Edgar Martinez hit that double to pretty much save the franchise in Seattle. It was upsetting. Still an all-time great game. And I still have no idea why David Cohn kept pitching to Griffey. Probably not the smartest move.
Probably not. All right, buddy. Well, you guys, we appreciate everybody watching as well. Drop us a comment. Let us know you're out there. And, of course, we always let you know that we're still running great content over there at winnersandwhiners.com. Make sure and check that out. All the different sports that are still going on are represented, including the Dominator putting out some nice WWE stuff. I know Scott has put out a lot of good draft stuff over there. So make sure you stop by winnersandwhiners.com. Check that out as well. So for myself, for Scott Reichel over there in Long Island, New York, we want to thank everybody for watching us once again. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. Check us out. We'll be talking about, the draft. It's draft week, everybody, and that's what we are going to be doing. So, and then on Friday, we're going to be joined by Dave Mason, who is the way it looks right now at Bet Online.
Hopefully. He said he's got to check his schedule. It seems likely. If anything changes, we'll let you know.
Okay, and we'll talk about how the draft affected the bets and what were some of the surprises there as far as the draft goes on Thursday. So make sure you tune in for that. Just tune in for the rest of the week, all right? You see that link pop up, click on it, check us out. It's going to be an entertaining show. For myself, for Scott Reichel, we want to thank everybody for joining us. And, of course, stay well, stay safe, stay home. We're going to get through it together. We're going to have sports here before you know it. Hang in there. Be patient, everybody. And we love you all. We appreciate you watching. All right? Everybody take care. Have a great day. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.